All right, this is how RuneScape became the hardest MMO by TheoryWise. Let's see what he cooked up today.
Hardest MMO. I know, I didn't believe it either until I played it for like 6,000 hours. You just don't expect that to be the case, right?
Damn, TheoryWise has 276 days played. What am I at? Wow, he's got 150 more days played than me.
There are MMOs with action combat, split-second reaction times, world-first races that have hundreds of thousands of viewers watching perfect mechanical execution from 20-odd players. How can a medieval point-and-click AFK simulator be harder than that? But it is. Much harder. Like, much harder. As in, no other MMO even comes close.
This is so true, guys. After today, we were learning Yama Godfly. By far the hardest content I've done in the game so far. It's rough to try and get that down. The tick perfect stuff is insane. And Zyron Cat said, everyone is making subreddit posts about their Inferno cape saying, I saw Sard get his, so it motivated me. Hell yeah, man. I love to hear that, bro. I love to hear that.
At least not from my experience with them. There is a caveat though. The difficulty in RuneScape is individual, personal. It puts you at the forefront of execution. Not a group, not a raid leader, you. My intent isn't to discredit the difficulty of other MMOs because many are challenging, from the fast-paced combo-driven PvP of Black Desert Online to the meticulous pixel-perfect execution of Mythic raiding in World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Where RuneScape differs is in how driven it is by the individual through mechanics that aren't present in any other MMO. So let's talk about that. For those who aren't aware, I started playing old school RuneScape a little under 2 years ago. Before doing so, I was a pretty serious raider in World of Warcraft. I had many cutting edge achievements which are given to those who down the final boss on the hardest difficulty.
Nice. Damn, I didn't know TheoryWise was cutting edge raider like that. He looks like he raided for a lot of tiers, all through Dragonflight and Shadowlands. Watching you today inspired me to learn Godfly. It's been fun. Hell yeah, Sinister. I bet you it was challenging, man. I was certainly challenged today. I saw you get quivers, so I said I could do it, and I did it. Let's go. I love to hear that, guys. Absolutely love to hear that. Muggy Wuggy, man, thank you so much for the prime. I thought if a bald man could do it, I could do it. Type shit.
Of the relevant raid tier while it is still relevant. And I did so with various guilds before quitting in the second patch of the Dragonflight expansion due to the game feeling, well, it's complicated. Boring would be a general summary, but meaningless is a more accurate one. I've made quite a few videos discussing why already. I've always played MMOs, a lot of MMOs, from FF14 to Guild Wars 2. I spent thousands of hours in Black Desert Online, indie titles, forgotten AAA blockbusters. I've tried them all. It wasn't until my friend and I decided to make a group Ironman in old school RuneScape that I managed to stick to an MMO in the same way I had World of Warcraft all those years ago. Collectively, we've accumulated more than 10,000 hours played, and over the course of that journey, we've had quite a few. RuneScape is the hardest
I hit my
MMO.
plate.
I know,
guys. I can't even make this up. I hit my plate. My plate hit my keyboard, and then it skipped somewhere in the video. Where were we at?
We felt the same way. We were excited to explore the world without expecting to be swept away by the high skill ceiling of clicking a goblin and waiting. Boy, how wrong we were. If we were in the top 2 or 3% of WoW players, then based on the achievements we've gotten, we're probably in the 5 to 10% range of RuneScape players. Where that becomes crazy though is in how multiplicative the skill ceiling of the game really is. The gap between the best WoW players and the top 5% is there, but it's not untenably large. Like if one were to genuinely commit a couple months of practice, they could likely apply to some of the best guilds in the world. In RuneScape, the difference between the top 5% and the top 1% is steeper than the difference between the other 95%. The amount of skill expression multiplicatively increases the best.
What he's trying to say is Port Hazard and Wooks are on a different level, and you ain't ever gonna be on their level.
Better you become at the game, to the point where some of the best players still see themselves as substantially underneath the Port Khazards of the world. And if you're not a RuneScape player, that means something important. In this video, I want to try and explain how and why. Early on in my progression, I took the role of getting a rune pouch for myself and my group members. If you aren't aware, Group Iron Man restricts your character to only being able to trade with other people in your group, meaning that you need to work together and create synergies with your skills, especially early on. The most readily accessible way of getting this item is something called Last Man Standing, a PvP minigame that functions like a simplified battle royale with scaled stats. It's one of my favorites. My mistake here as a new player was thinking that the PvP in old school RuneScape would be about as straightforward as our prior experiences with combat. Click a target, wait, hope for RNG hits, and sometimes eat a shrimp if you need to heal. It didn't take long to realize that PvP is a lot more complicated than I was expecting.
It's hard. It's
more
so hard.
complicated. People were freezing me, then stacking under my character's tile so I couldn't see what they were doing or attack them because you can't hit someone on the same tile as you. I was just kind of standing there while they walked out and hit me before I could click back and hit them due to the batch 600 millisecond tick system. It was frustrating, bizarre, confusing. I was
bro.
So confused. But I was really enjoying the rest of the game overall, and when I get fixated on something, I don't want to stop until I fully understand it. So I spent half a dozen hours trying to understand it. The movement, the consideration for weapons and armor, the prayers, the switching to different attack styles to catch people off guard. There was a lot more here to process, and surprisingly, for the first time ever, I was actually enjoying the PvP in an MMO. It wasn't intuitive, but it was visible, like I could see what I was doing wrong. A lot of MMO PvP feels like a—
Chat, is it harder to beat Oda block or is it harder to beat Port Hazard? What do you guys think? No, I'm saying, like, if you were to try to be better than one of them, which one would it be harder to be? Because I don't know. I feel like PvP in RuneScape, the ceiling of it is equally as high as the PVM is. You know, the gap that he's talking about? I feel like they're both on such a different level that, I mean, number one, yeah, like no one will, like you will, an average person would never have a chance, right? It's just, they're just so good, but I don't know. I feel like they're both very, very good and on different levels, you know, than anybody else.
A clusterfuck of spell effects. This felt oriented around me, the individual.
You think it would be easier for Port Hazard to get on Oda's level, to have a chance at beating Oda, than for Oda to beat like one of Port Hazard's? You think Port Hazard has a better chance of beating Oda in a 1v1 than Oda has a chance of doing 54 Awakened Leviathans while one tick flicking the entire time? Sorry about that. I think I probably would agree with that. I think I probably would agree with that.
And while I will get into PvP later on in this video, trust me, for this introduction, I got an early taste of what combat in this game truly is. Its consideration, its preparation, its precision. It's also liking and subscribing. I remember laughing to my friend, what did I just get myself into while processing all of this? What kind of a beast of a skill ceiling is hiding under the blocky graphics of this silly little game? With that experience under my belt and receiving the rune pouch, mostly from killing some of the bots in the minigame, I set my sights on learning a recently added new boss, Scurious. And from there, I was hooked. But before we get into the PvE, let's quickly summarize what RuneScape's combat even is. It's convenient, comfortable, fashionable, and very high quality. Wait, no, that's actually Belroy, the sponsor of today's video.
I almost got the Belroy sponsor too. What makes, Zaryu said this, what makes RuneScape PvP hard, or just gameplay hard, is they restrict what you can keybind. That is what makes RuneScape hard. Have you guys ever thought about that? RuneScape would not be nearly as hard if you could keybind everything. But the restriction of what you're allowed to keybind is what makes RuneScape hard.
Thanks again to Belroy, and back to the video. RuneScape's combat is strangely—
Yo, Uncle Boozer, thank you very much for the tier 1. It's an aim training game? Yeah, kind of is.
Defined by precision and rhythm, two traits that I can't correlate to any other popular MMO today. It's wholly unique to RuneScape. These two traits inhabit the majority of this game's
Guitar Hero?
Skill ceiling, and through mastering them, you are able to take on most of what the game has to offer. Through understanding them, you also begin to parse the tick and tile systems, two things that are intrinsically bonded to precision and rhythm. The latter, rhythm, is governed by the 600 millisecond ticks, and the former, precision, is dependent on the tiles. The game isn't only those things though. Like any great RPG, game knowledge is crucial. Preparation forms success, and success is achieved through repetition, often with lots of death involved. Every individual mechanic in RuneScape boils down to one of those two initial elements, like prayer, for example, a rather unique skill in the game that allows you to gain powerful buffs for a limited time. These can be buffs like protecting against certain types of attacks, making your own attacks more powerful, regenerating health quicker, and so on. As you have one or multiple prayers active at once, your prayer points drain. That's where the management and preparation side of the game comes in. Because you only have a limited number of backslots, you have to be very careful with how you utilize them. What are you bringing and what are you leaving behind? For a difficult encounter, more often than not, you need a couple of potions that regenerate those rapidly depleting prayer points.
See, we kind of got away from this in Classic WoW, where Classic WoW was the last version of WoW where it mattered what you brought in your bag. Like, to a certain extent, there were a couple gear swaps that might have mattered. There was some consumables that would have mattered. And eventually we get to a point where it doesn't matter what's in your bag. You just need your 1 hours and that's it.
But also,
you don't. RuneScape is like all about what you bring.
As anything else on the tick system, meaning when you activate a prayer, the drain effect initiates on the following 600 millisecond increment, the next tick. Understanding this, players have discovered something dubbed prayer flicking, the ability to activate, deactivate, and reactivate a protection prayer in the span of a single tick never initiates the prayer drain, meaning you can functionally sustain your prayer points indefinitely. That sounds pretty damn overpowered. However, it's balanced by other mechanics, rhythm, i.e. skill, and other simultaneously occurring processes. You can't just spam click prayers, since if you batch your click in the next tick or you reactivate far too early in the preceding one, you actually drop the prayer's effect, and for an encounter that deals quite a lot of damage to you, you risk getting hit off prayer, which is to say you don't have any protection prayers on. So not only do you need to be in rhythm to correctly prayer flick, you also need to do so while executing other mechanics. That alone is a pretty enormous challenge that most players are not able to do, me included. As a result, people like us have defaulted to a simpler strategy dubbed lazy flicking, simply activating and deactivating the prayer on the tick you would get hit, and then keeping it off as to not initiate that drain. Easier to wrap your brain around and manage, but still rather difficult to do.
Bro, I remember when I thought that prayer flicking was hard, and then people told me that, then people taught me about one tick flicking, and then people taught me that some people can one tick flick while they're moving and attacking at the same time. And then I was like, I'm never going to be good at RuneScape.
When you're also juggling your resource and every other boss mechanic at the same time. And that's just prayer, a single facet of the game, augmented by the player's emergent discovery. This prayer flicking method was of course never intended by the developers, but has since been embraced as a source of skill expression that rewards players with less supply use. Again, just prayer though, one of a dozen unique combat-specific systems that often have just as much depth and expression to them, not even mentioning the fact that they all overlap on each other. There is so much more here, and if we want to master the most difficult fights, you must understand these systems. Off-ticking, tile-skipping, stalling, red Xing, tick-eating, total nonsense to the average MMO player, but the blueprint to some of the most skill-expressive elements of RuneScape. All of this is the first realization you have as a new player. Oh shit, this game has more depth than I thought. The lack of intuitive elements may be frustrating, but the reward of figuring those things out might very well be worth it. To really talk about difficulty in the game, I can't just do research. What I say may be accurate, but it's also a bit hollow. How am I to talk about how difficult a game is if I haven't done the difficult parts? So I did. Over the course of a week, I locked myself in the two difficult wave-based challenges in the game, the Colosseum and the Inferno, two pieces of content that are often considered some of the hardest progression points in RuneScape. Now, I think it's important to emphasize progression here, because while these two things are hard and haven't been done by well over 90% of the player base, they are also not even close to the hardest things in the game. There are harder mechanics.
Chat, I did Inferno 2 days ago, and I haven't done it in 4 months. And I'm not kidding you. It felt so easy. And you could say maybe it's like, oh, because I was on a Slayer task. But think about this. Some people are doing it with like full fortified Masori, T-bow, you know, ancestral gear, like everything. So I don't think that compensates for that. Like you could have more damage and stuff. Like it just mechanically, it felt easy now from where I was at when I first did it. The pressure was the biggest deal. I guess that maybe that was it. Maybe there was just no pressure. But from doing Yama Godfly today, comparing it to like where I was at doing Inferno or in Colosseum, dude, this game scales. And it scales fast once you start getting into the sweaty stuff.
Technical challenges such as obtaining a cosmetic recolor of the Oathplate armor through completing the Yama boss in his hard mode variants. But as always with this game, that's not all. The benefit of being a curated sandbox is that RuneScape is able to have self-regulated challenges as well as developer-created ones. Things like soloing the hardest raid on the hardest difficulty is applying the kinds of emergent discoveries figured out all those years ago with prayer flicking to an entirely different level. But we'll get to that. Point is, the Inferno and Colosseum are harder than most content, but even then, goddamn. I knew right away that I wanted to do the Colosseum first. It only has a dozen waves as opposed to the Inferno's 69, nice, making failures in progression less frustrating because you're overall losing less time. The downside is that the Colosseum is mechanically more difficult than the Inferno. The latter requires strict inventory management and careful supply usage while pitting you against simpler waves of enemies, all the while testing your patience. On the other hand, the Colosseum kicks you into the deep end quicker. To achieve the level of skill needed to even take on these challenges, I first needed to grasp the elements of the game that I had never thought about in any other game. That's where the lack of transposability comes in. All of my World of Warcraft achievements mean fucking nothing in old school RuneScape, and that was never more clear than with the
yeah.
The corrupted gauntlet acts as a RuneScape inoculation. If you can survive it, you're functionally ready for everything else. At the time an Iron Man often begins the gauntlet, they haven't really done anything even remotely challenging. What it is for the uninitiated is a mini roguelite. You enter an elven training arena with nothing equipped and must scavenge supplies, fight different enemies, craft armor and weapons, upgrade them, and then face off the main boss, the Hunlif, all within a strict time limit. It's split into two steps: preparation, Hunlif. Those two steps almost perfectly encapsulate many of the most unique and difficult features of RuneScape's combat.
It's the first time that you're moving and changing your prayers and attacking all at the same time while avoiding ground mechanics and tornadoes. So essentially two different ground mechanics, but one of them is not moving and one of them is. So it's incorporating a lot of what RuneScape is.
Combat. The preparation or prep phase is
First time I did CG, guys, I got destroyed, demolished. I was not ready for it.
Functionally no different than gearing up and managing your inventory, while fighting the Hunlif is an out-and-out skill check. Much like most of the hardest fights in OSRS, the Hunlif presents the expected core mechanics that you ought master. He's utilizing protection prayers to dictate the kind of combat style you must attack him with, and then at certain increments switches those prayers on you, forcing you to switch weapons to continue dealing damage. Additionally, he attacks you with different styles too. Every few hits, he stomps his little feet and changes styles. He also may switch off prayer, and you only have a few ticks to reactivate it before getting hit off protection, making you pregnant, making you take tons of damage. Additionally, the room has burning tiles that change patterns. You need to make sure that you're always moving and precise with how you're moving. If that weren't enough, he also spawns tornadoes that chase you down for a limited time, and if they reach you, you likely won't survive for more than a couple ticks. To avoid them, you always need to be moving, but also careful with where you're moving to avoid the burning tiles. All of this progressively speeds up as his health decreases, and the last 20 or so percent is unbelievably intense for a new player. It feels overwhelming needing to pay attention to your
Chad, do you think I could go back in and one-shot CG after not doing it for 5 months? Probably, right? I wonder, it might just be easy now.
Prayer, your remaining prayer points, so you
at the time though, when I was finishing CG, 320 something runs in, I would still fail about 20%. I swear, I would fail maybe one of every 5 or like one of every 8. I would still fail them. Like I never completed them all. Like I would still always fail.
You don't run out, needing to reactivate it, always moving and dodging the ever-changing ground pattern, as well as the tornadoes that chase you down. Oh my god. The beauty of even the moment-to-moment challenges of old school RuneScape is that you're required to do them over and over again. On one hand, a long grind is a turnoff for some people. On the other hand, if there's ever a way to gain mastery over a piece of content, it's through repetition. And with this no resource required encounter, the game places a new player in the perfect position to do so. As you try and fail and try again, even the most intense final few percent become increasingly more manageable. The encounter psychologically slows down as you start processing where to look and when, how to deal with the mechanics all happening simultaneously. Because at the end of the day, it's all ticks, baby. The fastest the game will ever ask you to react is in 600 milliseconds, meaning that your decision and your actions can be predetermined. Mastering the Gauntlet is akin to mastering anatomy in art school. It acts as the foundation to almost every future encounter. Down the line, you will face challenges that remind you of the Gauntlet, such as the Doom.
That is a good way to think about it. Like, it'll never get harder than whatever you can click in 0.6 seconds. But to make it harder, they could make you move and swap your overhead in the same tick. So you make you do 2 actions or even 3 actions in 1 tick, which is where it gets insanely crazy. And that's the difference in the skill expression that RuneScape has over other games, is sometimes a boss fight will ask you to do 3 clicks in 1 tick, and that's where it gets super sweaty.
Doom boss, just far harder, faster, with more things to manage at any given moment. What's fascinating about old school RuneScape is how unique each mechanic is and how they synergize with one another. But on their own, they're relatively simple, straightforward even. Such as the way an NPC paths and how in turn you can manipulate that pathing in strategic ways. Early on into your RuneScape playthrough, you learn the concept of safe spotting, a process where you can attack the NPC freely without them ever being able to reach you.
I wish they could put new quests into the game or revamp existing quests and not make them safe spottable. Like they need to ramp people into like the moving, using overhead prayers a little bit sooner, because I got bored of the game in my first month because it was too easy. And then when I got to CG, I was like, holy crap, this game's too hard. Like, I wish there was more in the early game to show you what it's going to be like, or like hint at that. Maybe that's what the cow was for, in a way. The cow kind of helped with that, and then Scurrius, and I know Scurrius and all that, but like they need a little bit more.
They first encounter this at the Lumbridge cow pen, shooting them over the fence with a ranged or mage weapon. But this simple understanding creates deeper meaning. As you learn the language of the game, you start to use that language to your benefit. A fence is intuitive, obvious. Size is less so. The grid that grounds the world and everyone inhabiting it is also something you yourself manipulate too. Each enemy you fight also is part of that grid, and their varying sizes can create some pretty strange situations. Like, if an enemy is larger than a 1x1 tile, you can actually safe spot them in any area that requires pathing that is as thin as 1x1. They will path to you, but will never be able to reach you because they're too big. Notably, this only works for melee NPCs, not those that can just cast spells on you. Seeing game world objects as obstacles to manipulate creates environmental puzzles to solve at any given time, and much like the entire game is emergent, this discovery was too. Most of your early game is spent doing old quests where you mainly utilize safe spots to defeat the supposedly challenging quest bosses. I wouldn't call it fun as much as I'd call it educational. At the time, you may want to actually do something exciting, but maybe unintentionally, you're also starting to see the game world in a different way. These safe spots don't just work on these bosses, they are everywhere and work on most enemies. Now, of course, real modern bosses aren't safe spottable, but they use the same logic, and that logic of pathing is the second crucial step to understand when facing endgame challenges like the Colosseum and Inferno. You see, RuneScape may be rhythm and precision, but it's also planning and knowledge. The latter two elements were arguably far more defined 5 or 10 years ago, before boss mechanics were made more intuitive and reactable. If you want a brief explanation of how or why the philosophy changed, feel free to watch my video on the evolution of bosses. The idea of safe spotting a boss today is, I mean, yeah, everybody would probably hate that. However, both the Colosseum and the Inferno were all about safe spotting. Pathing and safe spotting were the root systems that these pieces of content oriented their identities around. The ever-increasing difficulty of waves were solved, as in completed, via meticulous and reactive safe spotting. And
I do kind of wonder when they invented Inferno and Colosseum, if they imagined the ways that people would be clearing it. Like, I wonder if they imagined it with prayer flicking and like the speedrunners, how they're like using the melee specs to kill them and stuff like that. I wonder if they imagined it to the level that, like, when they were designing it.
Increasing number of difficult enemies would spawn in almost random patterns all around the arena, and you would use the environment, these large pillars, to solve the spawn by finding a way to safely collapse these enemies. The second concept used here is line of sight, or LOS. Each NPC in the game has an attack range. If they're melee, it's usually 1 tile, but if they're ranged or magic-based, then it can range from 2 and above. Yet they can only hit you if they see you. If you're behind this pillar and outside their line of sight, they will simply start pathing to you in an attempt to gain line of sight. And because of the way the game has coded pathing, they end up collapsing in the same location, often in a
I've seen No Monkey do Colosseum without pillars, and it is insane.
manner that stacks them based on the amount
Flicking
of tiles,
every single
their
tick,
models,
5
size,
different
and habits.
cycles.
It's a really strange thing to wrap your brain around initially, but if you see each wave as an advanced game of peekaboo, you start breaking the game apart at its seams. I don't know how much of this was intended, but I do know that all of it stems from unintended discoveries years ago, and that alone is kind of cool, right? Although if it was just about line of sight, then the content wouldn't be particularly difficult. When each wave starts, there's the initial spawn and its associated solution or solve. This is very much a reactive decision. You only have a couple seconds to figure out what to do and where every enemy is. You look at priority targets and those you can't line of sight, so NPCs that you can't stack behind a pillar without also making yourself vulnerable to those that are already getting stacked, and then finding a way to take those NPCs out, to kill them. This becomes more complex when each individual enemy type has its own unique mechanics associated with them, such as these manticores, which ready up a powerful 3-tick attack that launches multicolored projectiles at you, each one dealing damage of a specific type.
He was inspired by someone who did it with 1 prayer point? You tell me somebody's cleared pillarless Inferno with 1 prayer point? That's crazy.
Forces you to not only solve the wave by managing its pillar stacks, but also do so while paying attention and switching your prayers accordingly. You see how now the rather basic seeming multitasking learned with the Hunlift in the Corrupted Gauntlet is now tested even further? Regardless, when you've created the pillar stack and have killed those lingering enemies, you're now faced with figuring out the second solve, one that requires a different skill set and isn't as reactive. Instead, game knowledge, particularly that of movement and ticks, is prioritized. In some situations, you may have 2 NPCs who attack with ranged, i.e. rangers, stacked behind the pillar, which is easy. You walk out, you pray protect from missiles, which is protect from range, and kill them as they both attack with the same style. However, what if there's an NPC that attacks you with ranged and an NPC that attacks you with mage? If you were to walk out praying ranged, the mage would hit you on the same exact tick as the ranger does, and you're virtually guaranteed to take damage. In a situation where supplies are scarce, requiring you to survive potentially half a dozen or more waves before even attempting the final boss, this is a surefire way to die. So what do you do? If you don't play RuneScape, you likely don't know, because the solution, like with many in the game, is only applicable to this game. You have to learn to off-tick them. This is a relatively high-level strategy wherein you utilize both the line of sight and the tick system to make sure that they attack you at different times on different ticks, allowing you to pray against both of them. So what does that look like in the Colosseum? You stand in the center tile of this 3-tile wide pillar, and then step 2 tiles out. This is because when you are running instead of walking, you move at 2-tile increments rather than 1-tile increments, allowing you to skip a tile and step out in the line of sight of the furthest NPC in the stack first. This means that the ranger or major in the back sees you one tick earlier than the one in the front, who needs to slide out of the stack to start attacking you. What this allows you to do is step out praying against the enemy in the back and then immediately switch to praying against the enemy in the front. All of this is made even more complicated by the fact that damage in old school RuneScape most of the time isn't calculated on hit.
I bet this sounded like some gibberish to people that don't play RuneScape.
On the animation of the NPC, meaning you can't react to what they're doing. You just have to predict or know it. So when the back enemy who sees me first starts their attack animation, I already know their attack has been registered. I can immediately swap to praying against the front enemy's attack style. And when they start their animation, I swap back to the back one. Now they are sufficiently off-ticked and I can be in the appropriate rhythm. Congratulations, you've just done the easiest solve, as these stacks get far more complicated and difficult to manage. For example, imagine now you are dealing with one of those Manticore enemies as part of the stack rather than just a simple ranger or major. The solution is the same, but they are overlapping in attack styles.
Simple solve, bro. Simple solve. You just step out same time. They're on the same tick. You just flick it. It's 4 different ticks. It's easy.
The same
got
tick,
this, bro.
which the Manticore shoots out its ranged or magic attack.
That's easy. That's the easiest solve you can get.
More punishing. But again, that's relatively simple. Understanding it, you can likely brute force your way to your first Colosseum completion. The solves can and do.
God dang, Nox Halley is hitting so hard on those mages. I didn't know 3 Wives was full oath plate, but full oath plate in the fire cape is diabetical, bro.
Get far more complex and difficult to even understand. Like, here's one of the best players in the game, No Monkey, doing a notoriously difficult solve for a triple pillar stack, something a new player may not ever attempt to begin with. The solution to this for someone of my skill level is likely to destack them by running to a different pillar and shouldering some hits in the process. On the other hand, No Monkey decides to pull off a set of complex solutions. These are what we'll call Z-pillar solves. The first issue is that he's being hit at range by this mage NPC, which he can't kill because it's at a distance and he only has melee weapons. Meanwhile, the pillar stack involves a ranger, a manticore who will hit him with melee first, and then another ranger behind that, meaning that he won't be able to simply run from the center pillar to off-tick the ranger and manticore, as the back ranger and the middle manticore will see him on the same tick he runs out.
Why he's smiling like that? In other words, why he's smiling like that, dude, on the hardest stack?
He'll probably die. But before all of that, how do we deal with this major who is hitting him at a distance? Since we understand how line of sight works, we need to drag him to melee by standing on the opposite side of the pillar. But in doing so, we open ourselves up to getting hit by the monolithic stack, right? This is where an advanced understanding of off-ticking at LOS comes into play. Okay, so get ready, hear me out, this gets a little bit complicated. You can stand on the centermost tile like you would when off-ticking normally, but instead of stepping out 2 tiles to the side, you step out 2 tiles diagonally, which will cause the furthest back ranger to see you first and attack. Then you step back to safety behind the pillar on the centermost tile for exactly 1 tick, since their attack.
So that's how you what they call a Z stack or whatever. You go back here to get the one in the very back to shoot you, then you go to the other side.
Now on its cooldown, as in they have to wait another few ticks before they will attack again. Then you must step out like you would be off-ticking them normally, praying against the manticore first.
Oh, I never understood how to do that. So he goes to this tile to get the one in the back to see him first, only for 1 tick. Then he comes back. And on the 4th tick, he comes out here so that he gets hit by the manticore first. And then on the 5th tick, it's lined up with the green. So he has green, green, green on the 5th tick that are all going to hit him at the same time while flicking the mage hit.
Only then can you swap to ranged. This is because the back ranger is still cooling down from his first attack against you, meaning his attack lines up with the front ranger instead of the middle manticore. If that weren't complicated enough, you now have to manage this rhythmic cycle of prayers for long enough to kill them all. But also you have to do that while still being aware of the major who was attacking you, and then go back and kill them first when they're in melee range. I think it's fair to say there isn't a single individual mechanic or set of mechanics in any MMORPG that I have ever played that is even 1/10 as difficult. Having done the most challenging bosses in World of Warcraft, their difficulty stems from perfect group-wide execution, so doing simple things together perfectly. The more people are involved, the more variables there are for error. That's why WoW's top-end raiding scene is so difficult. Each player must play perfectly. On the other hand, RuneScape challenges are purely individual, and as a result, can be far more demanding of that individual. And all of what we just talked about is barely scratching the fucking surface. I know. What the fuck is this game? I really don't know. This is insane. Hey, editing theory-wise here. I wanted to quickly hop in and clarify something I think I did a poor job of describing in the original script. World of Warcraft raiding, particularly in the World First race, is unbelievably challenging. What Blizzard does is create an incredibly tightly tuned boss fight and a set of synergizing mechanics that are like a puzzle to solve, a puzzle given to the best guilds and their associated raid leaders and analysts to piece together step by step. The raid leader breaks apart the fight, analyzes footage, creates fine-tuned solutions, and then expects the raiders to adapt to them at a moment's notice. There are right and wrong answers, and they need to be followed precisely. Any individual mechanic, when seen in a vacuum, is simple, yet collectively it's very, very challenging, especially for those that are figuring out these mechanics one step at a time. These raiders are setting the standard for everyone else. Every other guild will adapt to these strategies pioneered during the World First race. There is less malleability in each WoW fight. There are less choices to make, less individual points of skill expression, but collectively, there's nothing else like it. The kinds of strategies employed by the best players to achieve speedruns and min-max certain boss fights has led to a top 1% skill ceiling that spikes in its attainability. That's why I said the difference in skill between the top 5% of players and the bottom 95% of players is equal to the difference between
Yeah, because only 5% of people will ever get an Inferno cape, but Inferno is easy to get. So if you take all the Infernal cape havers and you put them on a chart of their skill level, I'm somewhere down at the bottom. And then you have guys that are just way up there at the top, like Port, doing some craziness. And it's not even in the same stratosphere.
The top 5% of players and the top 1% of players. What I need to do and learn to sit comfortably with the noob types and Port Khazards of the world would be akin to starting fresh-faced in Lumbridge, like I did less than 2 years ago. The amount of knowledge I'd need to acquire is no less extreme, but the skill barriers between that are 1 million times more demanding. A couple months ago, I learned the most challenging raid, the Theater of Blood, and spent around 60 hours becoming adequate at it in 3, 4, and 5-man groups. Getting over 100 KC, I was pretty proud of myself. But then I looked toward players who are soloing this group-based content in its hard mode, which I've never even done in the first place, let alone attempted to solo. There's an entire group of players who are known for their skill in this single piece of content. Their knowledge of the seemingly simple mechanics extends to how well they can bend and break them. How they can stall certain boss damage using weird niche spells, how they can utilize spellbook swap to perfectly duo encounters never meant to be duoed. I reached out to one of those players, a streamer and content creator S2L, to try and understand the basics of some of these strategies. Needless to say, I barely understood his response. The intrigue stems from how meticulously planned out these group-based speedruns are, precisely because the game is governed by its tick system. You can frankly develop a tick-by-tick strategy that can be followed by each player, and if executed perfectly, your run just becomes dependent on hit-based RNG. Interestingly, this is somewhat similar to how my top-end rating in WoW used to be. The difference, of course, is that the groups are smaller.
Guys, they're doing a 30-minute raid where they plan every single 0.6 seconds of the entire thing, and you can't mess up any clicks. Type shit.
So individual actions are rendered more important and challenging. Similarly, most of the tech used is Not intended, it's discovered, meaning there's no big blue ball to soak or fire to avoid. The actions taken by your group are granular. You could make an entire video essay on just the kinds of strategies developed via the flowcharts and bizarre tech discovered. They're using items and spells that regular players likely forgot even exist in the game, but because RuneScape has so many overlapping, unique mechanics in it, they become elements to consider, like how the Phoenix necklace synergizes with absorbing damage, or as I mentioned, how this random spell actually stalls the encounter. Not to get into another tangent about how this works, but the rabbit hole of utterly bizarro tech that these speedruns utilize is no different than speedrunning in other games. Like, you are breaking the game, you should be doing this at GDQ, and RuneScape has actually done this at GDQ. Except these mechanics are strangely embraced by Jagex. The game isn't designed around them. It's not like the newest boss will force you to learn about stalling with Humidify to only use one PNEC every 5 ticks. That actually means something if you were curious, but you could do that if you want. And often because this game takes so long to complete, these time saves do feel satisfying to learn. They are part of the ecosystem. Finding out about these things is like deciding to climb Mount Everest and at what appears to be the summit, breaking through the skyline only to see a mountain twice as tall and twice as steep. Realizations that I frankly never had in World of Warcraft or any other MMO. Not because I'm...
That is true. I've never looked at anybody, any of the Race to World First Raiders, and been like, those guys are so much better than me, I would never have a chance. I do understand that they are better than me, but if I applied myself, I still somewhere deep down felt like maybe I could have a chance at getting to like a top 10 guild if I really, really tried. But I don't have that thought at all with any of some of these RuneScape players. I know I will never be that good. I know I don't have a chance at all. Never has the thought ever crossed my mind that I could do what Port Hazard or Wooks does. It's never even registered. I never even like had a maybe I could get close one day. No, I know I will never, ever be close to that. But I didn't think that in WoW. I kind of thought maybe I had a chance in WoW, This is a different level. Like he's saying, it's like climbing Mount Everest and then there's another mountain on top of that. And you're like, shit, these guys are better than I thought,
Some savant at those games, far from it, but because individual skill expression is never incentivized in this way. It's never at the forefront of their most demanding encounters. Meaning what I need to do as a player in the hardest WoW raid is fall in line with everyone else. The opportunity to do something on your own is relatively rare and often relegated to certain classes and specializations. Ultimately, your individual skill expression as a player is
awesome
masked
video
by
so far, man.
group-wide success. It's worth noting that this is not a bad thing. I don't think World of Warcraft can or should do the kinds of solo challenges.
Guys, W's in the chat right now for Theory-Wise if you're enjoying the video, man. A big shout out, man. W's in the chat for Theory-Wise right here for this banger.
That RuneScape does. It's simply not built to. It has different classes and synergies that rely on the holy trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. To create the deepest content, it must utilize that core system. RuneScape has never been built on that, which creates different successes in its content. The sheer amount of depth in RuneScape is beyond anything I've ever seen, and the process of almost breaking the back end of the game reminds me of the kind of tech employed by the best speedrunners. You're not engaging in the game through its rigid rule set, you're finding ways to bend and manipulate that rule set to overcome its greatest challenges. So many of my videos about RuneScape use the term emergent gameplay to define player discoveries. Exploits that have since been embraced by the developers as they are exploits that add depth to the game in rather unique ways. The systems may break, but in a rewarding way. They aren't cheats, they're innovations. I can't name a single boss in the entire game where emergent discovery isn't at the forefront of its meta strategy, and each solution discovered by players is dependent on the 4 stacked pillars of RuneScape's combat: rhythm, precision, tiles, and ticks. With game knowledge as the blueprint, you begin to manage these 4 elements together and start to master the game. Doing so is far easier said than done though. Having played well over 6,000 hours now has allowed me to learn the basic solves in the Inferno and Colosseum. It has allowed me to complete some
I like that you said that, like 6,000 hours, and now you're just like kind of understanding what the game is about and how hard it is at 6,000 hours. Bro, if you put 6,000 hours into WoW, you've got like 9 characters, and you've probably learned how to parse. You probably got like top 0.1% mythic plus character. You're definitely cutting edge at that point if you want to be. You know what I mean? Like there's not really much of a ceiling in WoW. The roof doesn't go as high as old school RuneScape for skill expression.
Some of the hardest fights in the game. Yet completion itself has a different meaning in RuneScape. Killing something once isn't the goal, not always. You must kill something dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of times to receive its output, the reward. And due to the game's grind, this culture of solutions formed. If all you ever had to do was kill a boss once, then chances are we wouldn't have found all of these novel ways to speed up the process of doing this content. It's only because it's so demanding of your time does time saving become a value in and of itself, and when it has a value, it promotes creativity and ingenuity. Rules are only sought to be broken when they feel restrictive enough to warrant breaking. The speed at which you react to certain situations, manipulate certain encounters, utilize your pinpoint mouse precision to perfectly switch between prayers and items all form the backbone to greater game knowledge.
Movement is crazy.
And this is never made more clear than with the highest skill part of the entire game. The I told you we'll come back to it, and I feared this moment because if you thought PvE was complicated, holy fuck. There are 2 important points to touch on before we dive deep into the nitty-gritty of what is easily the most insanely complicated and disturbingly deep portion of the game. Each tick can batch 10 actions within it, meaning that you can click and do 10 actions in an individual tick, only if those actions aren't restricted by any tick delays. For example, eating hard food in the game, meaning physical food, not like a potion, puts you on a delay, both in your next attack and how long you must wait to eat another hard food, which is why you often see new players spam click food over and over again without it being consumed. Actions that don't have an internal delay would be switching prayers. That's how you can prayer flick. Switching gear, which allows you to click in your inventory and then it gets equipped at the start of the next tick. This means that you can effectively switch 10 pieces of gear in the span of a single tick. A 1-tick 10-way switch requires 10 precise clicks in the span of 600 milliseconds. That alone is just unattainable by most human beings. So it's fair to say that the best PvPers aren't human because what the fuck am I even looking at? It doesn't become any easier when you understand that some items have separate delays associated with them, like how drinking a potion has a separate delay to eating hard food, which has a separate delay to eating a tick food, such as these weird octopus-looking things called karambwans. You can eat all of these, or eat and drink all of these, in the span of a single tick if you click them in the correct order. I know this sounds like irrelevant bullshit, but it's worth mentioning because a lot of PvP is very much oriented around utilizing same tick actions.
It's just nuts,
and
man.
Not really in a rhythm.
It's so
in one
nutty.
of my first ever videos on the game, I compared old school RuneScape's PvE combat to a summer sonnet. It's all driven.
Guys, I was having a conversation with my boy Diddy Sauce the other day. I told this story the other day on the street, but he's a YouTuber, and I was trying to tell him, like, dude, RuneScape's harder than Elden Ring. You know that, right? And he was like, dude, no way. And I was like, yeah, dude, it's like Elden Ring is easy compared to like some shit you got to do in RuneScape. And he did not believe me.
By melody, by being part of the strange music of the game, being on rhythm. Meanwhile, I compared PvP to improvisational jazz. Your goal is to not have a rhythm because in having one, your opponent can predict your actions. And because the game is all trading blows in 600 millisecond increments, predictions are the separation between living and dying. The best PvPers in OSRS are those who can manage its deep systems alongside their own unpredictability and forward thinking. It's like a game of chess that isn't dictated by rigid turns. PvP is multifaceted and has since been separated by player-invented brackets. Things like pure Zerkers and so on are all different types of accounts that have micromanaged their combat stats to fit the most min-maxed output while remaining in certain level brackets, the most high skill of which is hybriding. It's often done by players with maxed combat stats and involves meticulous switching between all three combat styles, mage, range, and melee, to execute unpredictable moves and overwhelm your opponent via snowballing actions. I know that sounds vague, so let's start talking specifics. In a high-skill hybrid matchup, you need to manage your prayers as you do across the entire game, switching in response to what you think your opponent will be attacking you with. This is the first facet of prediction. And because these protection prayers are visible over your head, you also can use them to trick your opponent. Your damaging prayers, on the other hand, are not visible, so keep that in mind. It's also worth noting that enemies have the ability to drain your prayer via the use of another prayer called Smite, so in Outlast matchups, utilizing this tech could very well be the defining factor. You are also switching between the styles, which involves changing your gear. This can be between 2 and 10 items that give you accuracy and damage in the style that you're attacking with. Like if you want to hit your opponent with ranged, you would have a much easier time doing so in ranged gear, as it gives a ton of accuracy. On the other hand, certain gear has defenses that make it vulnerable to other styles, such as ranged gear being great against magic and melee gear being vulnerable to it. And because damage is on animation, not on hit, executing a one-tick switch on the same tick you would attack on makes your action virtually impossible to fully protect against. Another reason why predictions are such an enormous part of top-end PvP. Would you believe me if I said that this wasn't even 1% of the complexity? Because while
Bro, I love seeing this when West Ham, you'll see him, he'll swap his gear and click, and then when he knows the animation is going to go off, he's already swapped gear to just be ahead of the animation delay from the previous hit. So like by the time it hits you, he's already in a different set of gear. It's crazy.
switching is hard, sure, and predicting prayers certainly requires a ton of game knowledge and awareness, there's also movement. Most hybrid setups utilize the Ancient Spellbook, which gives you access to freezing spells that lock your enemy in place in a single tile for a short time. While they're frozen, you can stand on the same tile. This is called death dotting or DDing. If you do this, they can't attack you until they're unfrozen, meaning you can heal up and change your gear, items, prepare, and in some ways even recuperate. When watching a high-end PvP fight, this is like clinching during a boxing match, where the opponent leans into the other one in a kind of hug that disallows the opponent from attacking them for a moment. In boxing, clinching is done to stop attacks, recuperate, frustrate, and so on. DDing is done for the exact same reasons. In fact, it's an abject advantage as your model disappears in theirs. It becomes harder for them to see what you will attack them with next. But that's not all, because skilled players can actually attack the DD target and step back under them all within the span of a single tick, which means that if they click you as you're stepping out to attack, they won't retaliate. They can't, because retaliations happen on the next tick. So what is often the recommended strategy when being DD'd is to spam click, essentially batch your action with theirs, all the while predicting their attacks and prayer accordingly and even healing up. Movement doesn't stop there though. This is where I can finally talk about how bizarre movement mechanics in RuneScape are. I already mentioned that running in RuneScape is done by doubling the speed of walking by causing your character to skip a tile each tick, meaning that you are literally skipping every odd tile, allowing you to avoid certain one-ground tile effects in boss encounters. But what I haven't touched on is your true tile. You see, movement is funky since your player model isn't
When you really start explaining RuneScape, it's just like one thing after another, after another, after another, and it's like, holy shit, man. There's so many things in RuneScape you can do that can make you better, at the game if you know how to like use it. I don't know how to describe it, but like it's just crazy, man. It's crazy when you listen to somebody explain it like theory-wise is now how much there is in this game.
ever caught up to where your actual body is. It's essentially always a tick or so behind. So where you actually are isn't where your model looks like it is. It's always a bit behind. That's why there are plugins like the True Tile Indicator highlighting where you really are. something I view as almost mandatory to anyone trying to play the game seriously.
Bro, I started doing this in Doom where you click behind the title, you click behind this tile because you know that the slam is happening on the next tick. Your character is still here, but you click there and then you immediately click back because you know you're safe. Even though your character still hasn't moved yet, you're like, click, click. And you're like, yep, I dodged that. And then you're already moving the other direction. It's just such a feeling. Once you get to that level, you start to really feel the tick system and feel the attacks. And like, you just know when you're going to get hit and when you're not. It feels so good when you do it right.
In PVM, this means you need to pay attention to your true tile, not just your character model, because your true tile might get hit by something you don't look like you're standing on or near. In PvP, human error comes into play. You can confuse your opponent in a way you wouldn't be able to a computer by utilizing your true tile to your advantage, by stepping out of range, into range, moving at every tick, all the while attacking them, which makes you really challenging to click on in an effort to retaliate. That is made more confusing by certain weapons that stall your animation, root your character model in place while your true tile itself is running and doing all kinds of things, meaning that while they may spam click your character model, you're actually right behind them speccing them out. Nothing personnel, kid. Observing a high-end PvP matchup is in equal parts awe-inspiring and confusing in a way no other MMO is. PvP in MMOs is often unfun to watch, mainly because it's just kind of a clusterfuck of overlapping spell effects. To appreciate the skill, you need to have the game knowledge to process what is even happening.
This is so true, bro. This is why PvP in MMOs is not really watchable unless you know, unless you play the game, because you can't appreciate what's going on. It's how I felt when I was watching RuneScape PvP at first. I was like, what is even happening, you know? And now I actually can understand it and appreciate it now. But at first it was hard, and I still don't like watching World of Warcraft PvP, and I kind of know what's going on. It's just not a good spectator sport. I don't know what to say, but it's incredibly fun to play. It's so fun to play.
That is somewhat true for RuneScape. The skill itself is also really easy to appreciate too, in the same way you can a professional Counter-Strike game. You can just look at how well they aim and sit back in awe, damn, they're good. The same applies here. You may not understand the insane depths of PvP, but just watching them do like 15 different actions every 1.5 seconds is absurd. And that is rendered even more absurd when you realize just how meticulously planned those actions are. They are all in preparation for a specific kind of execution, a momentary setup to a potential KO. Paying attention to even the most subtle tells is a surefire way to improve your moment-to-moment PvPing. Things like your experience drop appearing before you even see the hit splat on your enemy. Since experience drops correlate with your damage dealt, you can actually assume the amount of damage you're about to deal by simply watching the numbers on your screen, and then setting your action in accordance. You attack the enemy, see a big XP drop, know that this means you're going to hit hard, and go in for a powerful melee execution to snowball that advantage. And because they're busy eating up, as in being delayed from acting against you, you can continue that snowball. This is likely the most obvious subtle tell though. There is a stranger element called the PID system. PID stands for Player Identification Number. When you log into a game world, you're assigned a PID that will then randomize at a certain increment of ticks, so let's say around 25 to 35 seconds. The reason this exists is so the game can process multiple actions being done at the same time, and then choose which action to prioritize. In a basic sense, all this means is sometimes your hit will land earlier rather than...
That means if two people are on the same tick and they attack at the same time, one of them will hit first. And if the person hits first, they say, it's my PID. Right? Or wrong? Yes?
Then later. In PvP, this is crucial information if two people are attacking at the same time. In a 1v1 fight, you always need to be aware of who...
See, they're on the same tick, but this person is hit splatting. This person is getting hit splat first, and then it lands here.
Who has the PID advantage.
See, the 10, they're both legs are kicking same time, but this person's getting hit.
Because that person can KO you in a single tick. You cannot react to some of their actions as they appear to be quicker and batched. But when the PID swaps, as in now you have the early hit advantage, now you must act in accordance to that.
I don't understand how a PID swaps. Is it random? Is it does the PID system RNG? Is it just randomly swap? It's a random swap. It just swaps. Okay.
That is balanced on the ebb and flow of battle, one that obviously wasn't designed to ever be noticed, but now is a core element of PvP.
It used to not swap, but people were abusing it. So it's just on a cycle where you're a number 1 through 1,000, and that number is rolling, and whoever has a 1 has the highest PID, and so it's just rolling and rolling you through. And so eventually it's like you're gonna be behind somebody. And it's just rolling. It's just rolling that number in a circle. So you always end up last in the PID system, but then you end up first.
PvP. Going for a KO when you don't have PID is often a bad decision against a great player because you're giving them an opportunity to react to your action, and all they need is an opportunity. They are now able to
PID works for drop parties as well. So if somebody drops a P hat on the ground, me and you click it at the same time, whoever has PID is the one who gets it.
Eat most of your damage utilizing that 3-step healing process I outlined earlier. I can't believe I'm about to say this again, but I'm barely scratching the surface here. PvP in OSRS is both outwardly impressive and houses the kinds of absurd skill expressions that may only be found in the most management-heavy competitive games. There really is nothing else like it. Yet due to that, the barrier to entry is beyond most players. If the vast majority of players aren't engaging in some of the top-end PVM, then asking them to do the PvP is like asking a toddler to bench 500 pounds. It's not their fault though. In many ways, it's like the fighting game community. The skill sets between games transfers, meaning that people who are already great at fighting games are able to be great at just about all of them. So when a new fighting game releases, the skill floor has already been pulled up by existing fans of the genre, making new players less likely to play. This applies to OSRS in a rather interesting way because its skill set doesn't translate to or from any other game, except I don't know, maybe like Counter-Strike? Do we want to watch Shroud play OSRS? I don't know. What this means is that no new players are coming in with an existing talent, and existing players are only becoming better. This is a surefire way to create a hyper-niche community that is impossible to penetrate. Even me, who loves spending too much time learning shit and really does love the PvP in old school Runescape more than any other MMO that I have ever played, can't really do it. Not just because I'm bad, which yeah, I am, but also because I don't even know where to start. LMS only functions as an introduction, and when you're risking your hard-earned gold in matchups against players who have been doing this for 2 decades, you simply don't stand a chance. For as much as some people like brushing RuneScape off as too RNG reliant in its damage output, the skill ceiling of PvP is an immediate example of just how wrong those people are. There is no world ever where any bad player will ever take a match off of Odablock, West Ham, or any other ultra-talented players that have made a brand out of being the best at PvP. It's not that Odablock will simply RNG his way to victory via damage rolls, but rather that new players likely won't even be able to click him, let alone roll damage. I recently participated in the Deadman game mode, a multi-week event where Jagex opens up new servers with expedited experience rates and unique mechanics and systems.
Yo, Deadman mode was fire. I had a good time. My PvP got way better, by the way. I'm way better than I used to be, which is still bad, but I'm better than I used to be. It is true though. I don't know how you solve the PvP problem, like getting new players involved and getting PvP hype again when it's such a hyper niche community and people are so good at it that it's very discouraging for almost all players to even try because they subconsciously know they will never be as good as the people that are just continuing to play every single day now. And this is a problem that a lot of video games have, is people are just so good at video games in general now that it's a bit of a turnoff to even play any type of PvP game, especially one that doesn't have a ranking system. Like I was saying the other day that maybe OSRS should try a ranking system, like a matchmaking system that ranks you against people that are on your skill level or with your MMR. I don't know if it would work. I don't know if there's enough people playing RuneScape, but it could be interesting to try it out, like Elo. I would love to see that and see if it would work. And I wanted to talk to Odablock about that, but we never got a chance to do it. I didn't want to bother him. I think they tried that or failed. I mean, let me know if it did.
All oriented around PvP. You can essentially fight players almost anywhere in the world for their loot. This is of course insular, restricted to those game worlds. It's split into level brackets for fairness, and I viewed it as a great opportunity to learn. I spent much of my time just taking little fights, trying to earn some gold, and hopefully becoming a little bit better. But as the game mode drew to a close, and I have certainly become a bit better, I still really can't do anything with that. The scene is too niche and sadly a bit too established. There have been many showcases of difficulty in RuneScape, both in this video and just in the content creation scene. You can look at the best PVMers like Port Khazard spend 6 hours doing the hardest fight in the entire game without a single piece of food or a single prayer potion, a test of skill, knowledge, preparation, and patience. That last word right there is the final branch of skill expression that I want to mention in this video, since it's often overlooked in RuneScape, let alone other games. When trying to explain RuneScape's crazy skill ceiling, it's easy to point to top-end PvM and PvP, because while it doesn't translate to other games, it's pretty simple to see just how much skill these things take.
Bro, how it would be even hard to describe what 54 awakened Leviathans in one inventory was to somebody. And even I play RuneScape and it's still hard for me to understand like how difficult that actually is. It is hard to describe that. Something that probably nobody might ever do again.
Patience, on the other hand, is often maligned. The grindiness of old school RuneScape is its most recognizable feature, yet for all those looking at it from a distance, it may be a turnoff. Why do I want to spend 250 hours cutting a tree? Even if all of those high skill cap things exist and are awesome and cool and exciting, how long do I need to spend doing monotonous labor until I can even experience them? And that's fair, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone in the same way PvM and PvP isn't for everyone, right? Some people just don't have the patience or time. Patience is a virtue, but it's also a skill. It takes a lot of it to do something extreme. No less extreme than PvM and PvP, just extreme in a different way. Months ago, the first new skill for old school RuneScape was released, Sailing. A number of players raced to be the first level 99, which is like the max level, a demanding challenge that had many people spend almost a week doing nothing but playing old school RuneScape actively and meticulously. Minimal sleep, maximum effort. But for those that don't know, experience gains don't stop upon reaching level 99. In fact, they stop at 200 million experience gained in that skill. Achieving 99 is 13 million experience. Since experience doesn't stop after, neither do the high scores, so some players wanted to race to 200 million. The amount of time required here is one thing, more than a month of playing upward of 16 to 20 hours a day, not passively, actively, doing what amounts to be the same thing over and over and over again. Whether you think it's stupid or not is irrelevant. Whether you think it is healthy, well, it's not healthy, but it is undeniably impressive in a morbid kind of way. It's only so because of the patience and determination required to do it. It's not as easy as to say, well, if I earned money playing the game, I could do it. Because no, you definitely couldn't.
You definitely couldn't.
Doing one thing for more than half the day, every day, for many days, is only even possible when that thing isn't extremely taxing. It is a level of skill, a pretty damn impressive level of skill at that. Now, that's not to say we should promote this kind of behavior constantly. That would just be unethical. But what I am saying is that perhaps long grinds, even the worst ones, such as runecraft and agility, harbor a level of skill in relation to the amount of patience and determination they require. Yet another element of RuneScape that simply doesn't exist in most games. Hell, it barely even exists in other MMOs. It's worth acknowledging and appreciating. It took me around 1 week to complete both the Inferno and Colosseum, and within that week, I
Damn,
took
that's
a
fast.
2 to 3 day break, meaning I spent a grand total of around 20 hours in the Inferno and around 35 hours in the Colosseum.
Hit him. Just hit him. Just hit him. Run out, 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 run out.
Oh, he got hit.
Jesus Christ. We
Holy
did it! You got the quiver.
Holy fucking shit,
No
bro.
way. There's no way you got hit.
Yes!
You can hear the jet hands, bro. The Zuck hands. I call it the Zuck cheeks.
I wasn't calculating the amount of attempts in the latter, however, using some death's coffer deductions, I believe it was around 50 to 60. I know I don't have the most patience, so I chose the more mechanically intense yet shorter variant, a trial by fire to learn the mechanics that I will eventually use in the Inferno.
I was watching some other video game and they said it could take, this is about to be a real grind. Getting the armor that you need could take up to an hour. That's funny.
No. I downed the Inferno on my 13th attempt and saw the final boss, Tiskal Zuck, on my 9th. I then saw him again on my 11th and killed him on my 13th. It was long, arduous, tedious, and not particularly fun. I have my Inferno cape though, something many people in my other videos discussing the game constantly pointed out my lack of when I shared my thoughts on the endgame. Now that I have that and the comparable quiver from
It's typically the people that have Inferno cape, I think, that are pointing it out, because the people that don't have it, I think they're trying to hide behind the bush still and just remain low key. But the people that have it, they tend to let you know. They're like, oh yeah, no Bofa yet. Oh no Tebow. Oh no Confliction Gauntlets. Oh. No Torva yet, huh? Oh, nice oath play, huh? No Radiant yet, yeah? Oh, nice. No Zuckhelm yet? Oh. Well, it just keeps on going. It never ends.
From the Colosseum, I am confident in saying that old school RuneScape is easily the hardest MMO I have ever played. I say this as someone who hasn't even breached the true skyline to see the peaks of its skill ceiling, things very few players ever even do. It should be clear that I haven't done the majority of the things I discussed in this video. While I am happy with my skill-based achievements, I am light years away from the best players in the game. So I want to thank many of the named and unnamed individuals that helped my research on this subject. I reached out to the best players in each unique area, asked them many questions about the subject, and have done my best to synthesize an interpretation of what they said for this video. I am blown away by just how communal this game really is. I've said it before, but so many people seem to discredit the way RuneScape's community interacts. It's a grindy, long-term game, and due to that is dismissed as antisocial, solo, individual. And this video reiterated that in some ways, right? All of this individual skill expression must not foster a community-driven environment. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because each and every one of these discoveries was made by the community, spread through it, taught by it. Without the best wiki page in gaming history, I wouldn't have ever managed to get as far as I have, and I think I say that for a lot of players. By being so difficult, by being so obtuse and occasionally unintuitive or convoluted, RuneScape has retained the kind of explorative sharing of information and discovery that most MMOs today have completely lost. They may be easier to get into or more immediately understandable through simplicity and a lack of systems, but what they aren't is social. Each discovery, even through my own research, was only possible because of how socially pollinated these subjects are, made all the more impressive by how insular and independent the game itself feels, not just in its gameplay, but in the scope of MMOs entirely. As I've said many times, there are no other MMOs like RuneScape, certainly none of the popular ones. I can map my knowledge of WoW onto just about every mechanic in Guild Wars 2, Elder Scrolls Online, and Final Fantasy XIV.
None of it applies over here.
Exact same language at that. I distinctly could not in RuneScape. So it must only have been through sociability did the community manage to create such a collectively impressive understanding of challenging, unintuitive and unique mechanics. RuneScape is the hardest, most grueling, time-consuming, obtuse, unintuitive, painful MMO I have ever played.
Bars.
And that's maybe why I keep playing it.
W video, man.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to my channel members for supporting my passion. If you
Let's
want to
go.
support my work, consider becoming a member of this channel to gain early access to my Fireside podcast and more. If not, just stick around, subscribe, like, and I'll see you next time.
W's in the chat, boys, if you enjoyed that video, man. Yeah, I liked that, talking about just how hard RuneScape is, man. And it was something that took me a long time to grasp, like how actually insane RuneScape is. And nobody knows it. Like, the people that are outside that have never played RuneScape, they don't know. I didn't know. And for a majority of people that are just playing the early game, they don't understand like how hard this game actually is, man. And it's so satisfying when you learn something hard and you conquer it. Like, Tick Perfect Bandos was something I did, and it felt great when I learned that. And this is something I'm going to talk about in my next video that comes out on Wednesday. But pushing yourself to learn the hard things in RuneScape and push yourself, even though it sucks at first, and you're like, I'm getting owned. This is ass. But like, doing that repetition and keep on sending attempts, eventually you just get it, and man, you feel so good at the end of it. It's like RuneScape is this long journey, but there's these mini journeys that you go on to learn each boss and learn just the simple mechanics, the clicks, and then you learn how to perfect those clicks, and then you clean up your mistakes, and then you learn there's a better method than the one that you're doing, and then you learn that one, and then you learn somebody. And then you hear that once you've learned that one and you thought you had the best method, somebody found a better one, and then now you go learn that one, and then you realize you can't do that one until you go get this item, and then now you're like, okay, now I got to go get that item, and I can come back later and I can kill this guy even faster, and then it's just, that's the game, man. That's the game we play. It's a bunch of mini journeys in one big journey. No one who doesn't play RuneScape knows how crazy RuneScape is. Very true.